Hey y'all, I'm Lachlan, and in today's video I am going to be ranking the 10 Kirby games that are available to play on Switch as of today. But like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, that way you don't miss out on any time that I post. But let's get right into it. So Kirby initially launched back in April 27, 1992. And so this year was the 30th anniversary of Kirby, and so that anniversary was technically back in April, but today, August 11th, they're having a Kirby Anniversary Music Fest, and I'll add a link down below. I think it was earlier this morning because it was in Japan hours, I believe, so it was probably really early this morning. That's essentially why I decided to do a top 10 or ranking the 10 Kirby games that you can essentially play on Nintendo Switch today. A few of them, I believe 3, I ended up playing the demo versions of them because I don't necessarily have them myself. I did want to try them out at least so I can include them in the rank and we can have an even number of 10. So I'm going to get right into this. I will put my caveat right here. These are my opinions. I'm sure you have different opinions than I do. So if any of my opinions clash with yours, please let me know down below. I'm curious to know your input and maybe I'll give some of these lower ones on my list another try. So I made a pros and cons list for each one and why I ranked it. But number 10 on my list is Kirby's Dream Course. It was available on the SNES, and so you can play it on that application. My pro for that was that you can basically write or draw what you want for your name entry. So instead of putting my initials, I decided to do like a cute little smiley face instead. So that was one thing that I did like about it. However, one con being that I really couldn't figure out the controls. I was really struggling trying to figure out first what to do and what buttons to press, and it was a little finicky and difficult, which leads me into my second con. I didn't know what to do once I was outside of that like green line that you see in some of the gameplay here, and so I got very frustrated with it. So those are 2, and then number 3, I'm not technically a golf fan, but I've never been one to play golf game type of things. And then number 4, the game just overall was a bit dull for me. But leading into number 9 on my list is Kirby's Dream Land 3, and I know Kirby's Dream Land is technically a favorite of mine, but the original one, not the third one. And this is one that you can play on the SNES app as well. My pro for that is that the levels and gameplay is what I remember from the Kirby's Dream Land of what I played on the Game Boy. But I do have my Game Boy still, and I still have that game, so I enjoy playing it that way versus on the Switch. And then my second pro for that is that the music is just great. My cons, the reaction time was a bit off. I noticed when I was playing it, I don't know if it was just because I didn't play it for a long period of time and maybe I didn't get the controls very well, but Kirby games aren't necessarily that difficult, I would say, overall, and so you'd think I would get the hang of it, but the reaction time was a bit off. Now, number 2, I didn't like having that little blob character, don't know his name, don't know their name, but I didn't like having them help me. They almost were a nuisance more so than help. I know you can like take them out from helping you, but I could have just done without him overall. And then my third con is I didn't understand like the small critters that you came across in certain areas. So there would be times that you would go through a door and there would be these like stagnant little critters just hanging out. Like they're not bosses, they don't give you anything. Maybe you unlock something later in the game and then those doorways will actually give you things. But to me, they were kind of just pointless. So yeah, that was unfortunately a con for me. Number 8 on my list is Kirby's Avalanche, which you could play on the SNES. A pro that I had was that it did have a training session at the start, which I did do. I appreciate having that. That way it kind of gets you used to the controls and the gameplay. And then Kirby in the middle is like moving around, and I almost got distracted a little bit while he was kind of doing his thing in the middle, but I just thought that was really cute, and so those were some pros for me. A con was I did not understand like the little black transparent blobs that kind of just fell. If I was able to control them or be able to mess up my opponent in a certain way if I did certain actions, I couldn't quite figure that out, or maybe I just wasn't moving quick enough and that's why I kept having that issue. But not a big fan of those, and I'm also not a big fan of Tetris type games. They haven't really been a fave of mine in the past. Probably because I'm not that great at them. And then I couldn't get past lesson 2 in the training session. Like, I only did the training session for my gameplay, and I got through this first session just fine, or I did struggle, but it was okay. But I couldn't get past the second lesson, so it kind of just put me off a little bit on that one. Number 7 on my list is Kirby Fighters 2. Now this is one that you can purchase in the eShop. I believe it is $20 full price, but I played the demo of this one. So some pros that I had with this was the story mode was similar to Super Smash Brothers for like the team fighting parts, and then also it was similar to Mortal Kombat where you had to move up a tower like floor by floor to beat the bosses at the top. So I did like that aspect of it. I can also be Kirby with the sword, which is, if you saw my Kirby in the Forgotten Land video, you know that the sword is a top tier power. So happy that I could have that in there. Some cons, even though it did have that Super Smash Brothers thing in it, I'm not a huge fan of Super Smash Bros. I know. I'm one of those probably rare creatures that doesn't like it, but all I do is button mash when I play that type of game. And so something like that just isn't for me. I think Kirby is a little less button mashy than a Super Smash Bros, but it still kind of resembled that and just kind of put me off. Number 6 on my list is Super Kirby Clash, and this is a full game that you can download for free. It's always been free. I did used to have it on my Switch Lite like back in the day when I first got it, so that's a pro for it. It's a free game. Another pro was that you can build your team up, so like level them up, you can update their weapons, update their costumes. Those were some fun things that I liked doing. Now some cons with it being free, it does have in-game purchases that you don't necessarily have to buy, but I don't like having that in games because I don't have willpower. So I think if I was really engulfed in this, I would be more tempted to do that. So that's a con, unfortunately. And then it's not much else other than fighting bosses is essentially what it is. That's kind of what the whole story mode is about. There are some online stuff as well, but even that, you're just fighting bosses. So now number 5 on my list is Kirby's Superstar, which is on the SNES. Now I put this one at number 5, not necessarily because I liked it more than some of the other ones, but it states before you open it that it's 8 games in one, and then it also has a guide at the beginning. You can play or you can skip it, but I thought that was very helpful, and I did like that, for especially if you're a new player. Some cons, or a con that I saw, was that Kirby changes color based on the power that he has. So I picked up, I can't even remember which power it was. I think it was almost like a whip type of thing, but he changed colors from his normal pink to that, which kind of makes him less Kirby-like. And then the other thing too was I felt like you had to hit the enemies a lot of times, more so than in other Kirby games, to like kill the enemy. I didn't like that. Wasn't a fan. Number 4 on my list is Kirby's Adventure, which is on the NES. Now this one does have some cute mini games to earn like extra lives that I really enjoyed. The music was really good, and it was also similar to Kirby's Dream Land, which I really love that game. And so anything similar to that or giving me those nostalgic vibes, it went higher up on my list, and this one had that for me. Now some cons were the controls were a bit hard to figure out at first. I got it after a little bit, but it did take me a little bit of time, more so than in the other games that I played. And then the Kirby that you play as, I felt like he was a more muted pink. And I know I'm talking about colors a lot in this list, and that kind of puts me off, but if Kirby isn't like the pink that we know him as, if he's more of a muted, pink color, it just doesn't seem very Kirby to me. So that kind of put me off a little bit. Number 3 on my list is Kirby Star Allies, and this was another one that I played the demo of. So there was technically 2 on my list that I played the demo of instead of the full game because I didn't purchase it, but I really enjoyed this game. I was actually surprised. Graphics were really good, the music is great. You can make the CPU friends like join your team, which I thought was really neat, and I've never seen that in a game before. Like you can kind of befriend them if they have like a certain power, maybe like fire or something. They can join your team as you progress through, the gameplay. And I just thought that was just an interesting and cool concept that I haven't seen in a Kirby game before. Having the CPU friends was nice, and that is something new, but it did make the game a lot easier to play, which to each their own. If you want to have, you know, the fun team of everyone following you around and them helping you out, there are certain points where you do need multiple friends helping you to kind of get through the puzzle or get to certain areas, and so it is helpful in that, but it did make the game a little easier, so it just kind of made it more of a con for me. I was hoping when I played this one, I knew one of them was more expensive over the other out of the 2 demos that I played, but this one I was hoping was the cheaper of the 2. Unfortunately, it was not, so con for this is that it is $60 full price, and I just feel like that's still a lot to me in regards to what this game is. It makes sense for like something like Kirby and the Forgotten Land, but for this, where it is kind of similar to just a 2D platformer, but they are like 3D characters, I felt like $60 just seemed like a little much. Maybe the $40 range would have made more sense. Number 2 on my list, and it's probably high up on my list because of the nostalgia and me playing it a lot when I was younger, is Kirby the Crystal Shard on N64. For one, you know, nostalgia, but for the time and the system that this was on, I feel like the graphics are pretty good for a game in that time. The mini games are literally my favorite part of that game. I didn't play through, I don't think I finished the entire game, which I need to do that, but I did play the mini games a lot. Those were like my favorite parts of the game. I remember playing with my brother growing up. We would battle each other. The cutscenes just bring me joy, and maybe it's that nostalgia for me, but that was a pro. And then the music was great. I mean, what else can I say? Now, a con with this one is you can't always find the power that you want. And so in that one, you can't always find the sword. So Kirby can have the sword the entire time, and you know, that's top tier for me. And then the powers in this game aren't as great as like the latest Kirby game, like Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Like some of them just didn't fit the bill for me. And so that kind of was my 2 cons with that. But I had 4 pros, 2 cons. Nostalgia, that's why it's number 2 on my list. And then number 1, of course, you probably already know which one it's gonna be. It's Kirby and the Forgotten Land. The graphics are really great on that game. Cutscenes bring me a new type of joy that I've liked, and kind of similar to the Kirby N64. The music's fantastic. The story and levels are wonderfully created in my opinion, and it's the most open world-like Kirby game so far that we've been given, and so that I just really loved. Now I will give it a con because, you know, not everything isn't always just perfect. My con would be, and you might already guess it, is that I can't be Kirby with the sword the entire time. There are times during the game where it forces you to be like a little flame power instead, because you may have to light some lanterns, and so because I couldn't be the sword Kirby the entire time, that was my one con. But this is my list of the 10 games that you can play, the 10 Kirby games that you can play on the Switch. Let me know in the comments down below your opinions. You know, what did I put low on the list that you would rank higher, and tell me why. I'll check them out for myself, and maybe my opinion will change. And yet again, this is my opinion. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion. But like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell if you enjoyed this video. Let me know down below what you think, and thank you so much for watching.